The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Alrighty, good morning, everyone. If you can hear me, if you could just type in yes in the chat box, just so I know my audio is working. Sometimes it's a little funky, so if anyone can hear me, just please let me know before I get started. Okay, thank you. All right, welcome to Canfield Certified Training Program. So we track training attentiveness. So if you have any program such as Outlook or web browser, Teams in front of your screen, please just close that out so you are attentive. If you are not attentive during this training session, you will not receive the test at the end. So just give me your full attention for our review today. So we're just going over HairMetrix with D200. Just the unclipped version of HairMetrix. We will be doing a HairMetrix with D2, probably in May, so just so everyone's aware. So we're going to start with the basics. So you're going to plug in your D200 to the outlet and the power source. And we're going to start with using the HairMetrix software. So when installing the software for a user, you want to make sure that Vectra and Mirror is both installed and the product key is registered. And then you're going to instruct them to launch Vectra. So you want to make sure when you select settings here, in this general tab, you want to make sure that you enter the user's practice and contact information. So it doesn't say plastic surgery center here. You can add the name of the practice, any contact information. They can even upload a logo here. And then you want to make sure that the drop-down logo says HairMetrix. It doesn't say Vectra or Mira. So you want to just make sure that's enabled for all customers. And then you do want to make sure the version 7.99 build for HairMetrix is the most updated one right now for old schema. So you just want to make sure that everyone has that build as well. And then we can start by adding a new patient. So here in the HairMetrix software, we can start by clicking new patient. And then we can add as much information or as little information as we'd like. The only required field is where it says last name, but you can add first name, patient MRN, or a patient's ID, their date of birth, their gender. So whatever the doctor, how much information or how little information the doctor wants to put in, they can. And then we select new HairMetrix. Here we will select the globals that we want to take. So you always select the globals first for the specific patient, and then as you begin to select them, they'll populate here on the wizard summary. So the user knows which ones they've selected. And then you always want to make sure that this drop-down says D200 for camera of choice. And then the Unclipped with analysis is the desired trichoscopy model where we keep you at 15x magnification. We count the hairs for you and give you all the objective data. No trichoscopies, obviously, if you didn't want to take any. And then images only, no analysis, is where you're able to capture trichoscopy images at a higher magnification. So you can go all the way up to 50, 80 magnification and capture images, but again, no analysis. And then we'll select for the trichoscopy images. So you can select up to 6 areas, but typically I tell users 1 to 3 is sufficient. And then as you begin to select the areas where you want to take those images, these little blue boxes will appear. I typically recommend adding measurements from different landmarks, such as the glabella or the tip of the nose or the tragus. So just using a measuring tape and measuring back. That way when the patient comes back in to be re-imaged, that we're able to get back to that same location. And then another workflow that I've seen is a user will select an area where they're not seeing hair loss, such as the occipital region or the back of the head. That way you can compare an area that has hair loss to not an area with hair loss to establish that specific patient's norms. Because unlike Vizia, HairMetrix does not give any hair norms. So just a different workflow that I've seen. And then the capture process. So to capture the image on the actual scope. For the global images, you want to make sure that you're not too close to this patient's head. You're at 0x magnification. And then you want to make sure that there's no lens on that D200, and you want to align the patient with the blue schematic on the screen. So if it's a superior view like this, you would tell the patient chin to chest as you're trying to align them up with the hairline here and their face here. So then once you've captured the images, you can either retake the photo or you can save it by pressing the check mark button. Images do not automatically save into HairMetrix. And then this is something that unless you have 799 or higher, you cannot retake an image after you save it into the HairMetrix software. So this is a newer feature, but after you save the image, you can press this retake image button. And so this way you're actually able to delete an image once you've saved it. And then transitioning to the D200, you want to make sure that that rectangular cross-polarized lens is attached here. And then emphasizing to a patient that this is how you want to part the hair. Without a good hair part, the algorithms aren't going to be accurate. I can't emphasize this enough. The algorithm stems at each hair follicle and then counts each hair fiber. So if there's a lot of hairs on top of each other, the algorithm's not going to pick up if it's 1, 2, 6 hairs. So you can see here the user's just parting the hair. And then you can see this is a bad example because there's a bunch of hairs on top of each other. And this is a good one because you can see each hair is flat and the hair part is clean. So I always send that video with the welcome package so the HairMetrix users can reference that. Because like I said, if the hair part isn't good, then the hair counts, hair density, nothing is going to be very accurate. So once you've taken the image, you can also adjust the brightness there on the side on live preview if necessary. And then you can define that region of interest, or the ROI. That's where the analysis will take place. You want to make sure that's right down the hair part and it's not all the way out here to the sides, because you won't get an accurate read. Again, a bunch of hairs are on top of each other. So our region of interest are right down the middle. And then we can continue to the assessment tab. Okay, any questions about the capture process with HairMetrix? If so, you can just start writing them in the chat and I will move on. Okay, so here's the assessment tab. So here I've taken 3 trichoscopy images. You can toggle on and off the images with out and with analysis. You can also have the blink tool, so blinks off and on. To toggle the overlay button off for follicular units, you would select the buttons here next to it with follicular units, hairs, and triangles to show the distance between each hair follicle. So this is what the image looks like without any of the overlays on. Here's just the follicular units. Here's just the terminal and vellus hairs. And then here are the triangles. Then you can also identify the thickness of each hair based on its density in microns. So you can zoom in and really see here. We have dark green, which is larger than 90 microns, which is very thick hair. Then we have the light green, which is 60 to 90 microns. That's still pretty thick. That's intermediate terminal. Then we have small terminal, which is 30 to 60 microns, those yellow boxes. And then anything less than 30 microns is considered vellus or miniaturized, and that's the red boxes here. The thicker the hair, the more scalp coverage that a specific user has. So, the goal would always be to increase that hair density. Moving on here to the hair count per centimeter squared. We're able to see the hairs in each specific region. And you can also drop down and see the sum of hair widths here. So the 165, the 138, the 176, that's the total number of terminal hair. So that's encompassing of small, large, and intermediate terminal. And you have that red number there on the bottom. The total hair count per centimeter square, 175, 142. So sometimes people get confused about that. The total's on the bottom there. And then the sum of hair width is the total scalp coverage. So we're just looking at hair counts, but in microns. So for every one large terminal hair, that's considered 90 microns. So this is how we're adding here to these numbers. And then we have the other objective data here on the sides. So the first one is terminal to vellus ratio. So for every one thin hair, how many thick hairs do I have? So you'd never want a 1-to-1 ratio. If sometimes we see NA in a specific area, means it's not applicable because that specific patient doesn't have any vellus hairs. So that's a question I get a lot. So just so you're aware. Then we have average hairs per follicular unit. So on average, how many hairs are growing out of those white circles? So you would hope to see that number increase over time if we're seeing an improvement in the hair growth. Hair width in microns, so my 60.6 here, my temporal region, that falls under the intermediate terminal, kind of bordering on small terminal. So this specific user has small to intermediate terminal hair as our average there. We have total number of follicular units in each target area image. So how many openings do we have for hair growth? And then the interfollicular mean distance is just the average distance between each hair follicle. And if you were trying to increase the amount of hair follicles in one specific area, you would hope that would decrease over time. You can also manually edit the data. So if you have a clean hair part, you won't need to go in and do this. But sometimes if there's hairs on top of each other, to validate the image, you can press the edit tool there on the top. And now you can edit the actual follicular units and the hairs themselves. So you can zoom in and start at the base of a hair and click on it. That will create the follicular unit. And then you want to create that box. So drag it up the side of the hair shaft and drop it, and then drag it over laterally. You want to make sure that it's the same width as the hair, so it falls into the correct category based on its density. And then you can press save and close to save any changes. You can also edit the region of interest, the RI there. On the sides, you can expand it or make it smaller or move it if you wanted to after you've already saved the image. You can also hide the data, so you can just look at the image itself just to see the images in larger view. And then you can also view the globals next to it in the tab here. So you can view the global photography within HairMetrix. Any questions so far? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm going to keep going. If you do have any questions, you can just write them in at any time. So compare session. So you're able to compare not only the images, but the data itself, right, side by side. We're able to control 2 different time points here. So you can click on the drop down and select different dates. You can do baseline to 3 months or 3 months to 6 months. So you can show the patient and they can visualize, are we seeing an increased hair count? Or are we seeing thicker hairs? Are we seeing an increased amount of hair coming out of each follicular unit? So it's a great way for a patient to be kind of included in their hair journey. You can also view the globals and compare them side by side. Note that this does not automatically get added to the final report. You need to press add to report there on the bottom right to add that specific time point, and then it will show up on the finalized report. So the customer report here, it will have the name of the practice if you've changed that in the beginning, all the data from that day, any comparison or globals on the second and third page. You can save this as a PDF, email it, upload it, print it out on the spot for a patient. A great way to increase touch points with them so they can take their results home. Then I just want to review follow-up captures. You can select look up patient instead of new patient. And now you can select their name and either press enter or press show matches. And then you can click into their chart. Every time point this patient has come in will live in this chart, and it will be time stamped with the date and time up top. And then you can select new HairMetrix. And now before you begin imaging at a follow-up appointment, if you wanted to add any images, you need to do this before you start imaging. You'd press the pencil and paper button here above, and then you can add anything to the prescribed capture. So let's say I wanted to add a different global. I can do this at a follow-up instead of having to do the same images. Another feature that HairMetrix has is you're able to export the images and raw data from the patient's chart here. So if you select the one time point that you want to export and press export there on the bottom right, this allows you to save these images here and an Excel sheet. So if someone wanted to use their images in a PowerPoint and speak about HairMetrix, or you're doing a study at a site, this is important to know because this is how they're going to take the data away from HairMetrix. And then you can see that it has the hairs per centimeter squared to mortal vellus ratio. So it has all this information for them. So if a doctor wanted to present using HairMetrix and their data, this is how they would export it. And then also the ProVeos, soon to be Veos, is also compatible with the HairMetrix software. So the Veos and D2 will be hopefully ready within the next few weeks. So the new Veos will be functional with the iPhone 16 as well. So the ProVeos is only for 13, 14, and 15 right now. Both will still be 12.5 magnification, whereas the D200 and D2 is always at 15 magnification for hair. They're both going to be wireless, the Veos and ProVeos still. So once we are ready to launch both of those, I'll be sending out, or some of your account managers will be sending materials to compare the two scopes. When presenting on either one, I still reiterate that both dermatoscopes are both compatible with HairMetrix software, which provides fully automated real-time analysis. They're both cloud-based AI processes that analyze hair images and track treatments with patients with hair loss. That way you're able to effectively communicate the treatment options and increase treatment compliance. And so if there are no other questions, that brings us to the end of the Canfield Certified Training Program. So test is comprised of 10 questions, which you will have 20 minutes to complete. Questions are then one at a time, and then you can move on to the next one. And if you score 70% or higher, that you'll be sent a certificate saying that you're authorized to support HairMetrix program. And if you don't receive an email, just because you weren't attentive, so this is what it will look like. You'll enter your first and last name and then press start test. And then this is what the certificate can look like. Any final questions? I'm always available for one-on-one training to cover HairMetrix. Perfect. My email here is danielle.vergona@canfieldsci.com for any other questions you might have. Thank you so much for attending and listening. We really appreciate your positive interactions with customers. Very important to Canfield. So with that concludes the HairMetrix training program. Thank you all very much. If there's any final questions, you can put them in the chat. If not, have a great rest of your day ahead.